My fellow Jedi and Padawans, I'm sure you've seen from the title as well as the thumbnail that Banner of War is still absolutely nasty inside of Destiny 2. Keeps you alive as well as giving you some pretty insane melee damage, sword damage. Totally up to you if you use a sword, but for this we're definitely throwing on tractor cannon for that extra weaken on targets so we can juice bosses, champions, whatever you are going into, just staying alive, helping your teammates out as well with Banner of War, and giving yourself that woven mail on top of it. So first off, Banner of War, if you didn't know, defeating a target with a melee attack, finisher, or sword to raise the Banner of War that pulses with energy, periodically healing nearby allies and increasing melee and sword damage. Targets defeated by you and nearby allies charge the banner, increasing the speed of the pulses, so takes a little bit longer to get up to ×4, which is the max for Banner of War, but once you get there, it feels like you never leave. Now, pairing with Banner of War, you have two options for exotics in my opinion. The Synthoceps, which is what I go with a lot of bosses because we are being surrounded, which gives us a nice buff to that melee damage, which stacks with Banner of War. You could also go with Wormgod's Caress, which got a nice little buff for a decaying timer, which feels way better and allows you to keep up a little bit better damage over time, even compared to Synthoceps. They both put out similar damage, totally up to you. Now for mods that we are using on this special ammo finder, so we can keep our 1-2 punch shotgun up and ready at all times, just a part of this build that is pretty necessary, that 1-2 punch shotgun. Now we're going with special ammo scout, so we can spread the love around with that special ammo, as well as strand solar siphon, so all of our weapons are going to be creating those orbs of power besides our tractor cannon. Now we're going to be using heavy-handed as well, so all those melee defeats, we're going to be creating orbs of power with giving ourselves a grenade energy back based on double impact induction for the powered melees. Now, emergency reinforcement for that endgame, staying alive. When we get injured, we get that damage resistance with arc solar, totally up to you, just what I was using for the activities. Now we got invigoration as well as absolution. When we pick up those orbs of powers, we get ability regen, all of them, as well as just our melee, and then elemental charge. Destroying those tangles that we are creating has a chance to give us armor charge, which again we're using for emergency reinforcements, which finally even more orbs of power via Reaper, as well as double outreach to continuously have our melee up. And as you can see, 100 on the strength, 100 on resilience to help with staying alive and really spam our melee ability as much as we possibly can to get Banner of War to proc, as well as just juice damage with it. Now, for weapons, like I said, 1-2 punch shotgun, definitely a necessity. I personally really like using the sword breaker with pugilist as well as 1-2 punch. 1-2 punch gives us that nice juicy damage for melee as well as pugilist. When we get defeats with this, we actually get melee energy back, so it's a nice little positive feedback loop right there. Now for me, I'm using Zawuli's Bane. Really any solar weapon this season will work in the slot. I personally like Zawuli's for the explosive payload, plus incandescent just pairs perfect for that solar synergy and our artifact mod. Now tractor cannon right here is for the deeper pockets and scientific method, so damaging opponents gives that temporary increase to speed and handling, plus we have the more ammo reserves, so we can suppress enemies and weaken them to do even more damage with the 1-2 punch combo and our melee with Synthoceps. Moving on to the artifact right here, we got the unstoppable hand cannon for Zawuli's Bane with flame, fiber, and freeze for that solar strand combo that we had on our helmet. So our shotgun as well as our hand cannon creates us orbs of power. Now with that solar weapon, kindling trigger as well as flint striker are going to be able to proc, so we can become radiant with those rapid solar precision hits or the rapid final blows. So that'll help us to proc kindling trigger trigger to cause even more scorch to be spread. On top of that, we're going to be using Torch, so when we are Radiant, we deal increased weapon damage to combatants affected by Strand, which we will have Unraveling as our debuff for Strand because of Unraveling Orbs right here with that shotgun. So we have that on top of it to create even more DPS with this build. And Horde Shuffle, so Unraveling targets, dealing damage, creates threadlings every so often. Really not as crazy because we're using our shotgun like once to hit an enemy and then use our 3 melees, use our grapple and melee, then we might do a couple more of the punches depending on the boss, but usually everything that you need is going to be wiped out within those 3 melees beside raid bosses, dungeon bosses, but you can still one phase a lot when you really get things down, especially if you are abusing the Strand tangles as well as those little grapple points to really juice that shoulder charge damage on this build. Now, as you saw at the beginning there, we absolutely juice the first boss of the Warlord's dungeon. I know you can one phase it with Navigator using the grapple points like I was talking about, but just normally without having to worry about any of that. For the normal bear solo, you can do this in 2 phases easily. We are using that Berserker Titan with the Towering Barricade, Strafe Lift, Frenzied Blade, and Grapple. Grapple to help us to unravel targets, as well as it helps with that Strand, and you get the grapple melee, which is the crazy damage for this build specifically. You get it a couple times in this because of our Thread of Generation. Now, the Banner of War, which I went over earlier, defeating those targets gives us the Banner of War, which heals us and gives us that increased melee and sword damage. Super juicy, super OP. Now, I am using Into the Fray so we can destroy tangles or cast supers to get Woven Mail, which will help us with that damage resistance, staying alive. And while we have Woven Mail, our melee regenerates faster, so that is beautiful for this build, so we can put out even more damage with the Frenzied Blade, that 1-2 punch and tractor cannon. Now for me, using Thread of Fury, damaging targets with tangles grants us melee energy as well, just helping us to get back our melee even faster. Powered melee final blows grant our Strand weapons unraveling rounds. This is just on top of our artifact mod, just because that always won't be there, so this will help to give us unraveling rounds on our Strand weapons. Now we're going to be using Thread of Generation. Dealing damage generates grenade energy, which allows us to proc the grapple melee, like I said, a couple times during damage phases, because everything counts towards giving us that energy back for when we deal damage, whether it be super, weapons, or just our melee in general. Last but not least, well, we have a Woven Mail. Weapon final blows create tangles. Just helps because we're going to have Woven Mail pretty consistently because of Into the Fray, and those tangles are super nice for creating just the explosions, as well as we get everything to proc with destroying them up here, giving ourselves a Woven Mail. So this build absolutely juices everything you can go into. Master Lost sectors, you can just blow through 1-2 hits depending on the stack on Banner of War. When it's at ×4, the grapple melee will just one-shot basically everything, even in Master Lost sectors. So staying alive is super easy, still very broken, and the nerf really didn't matter one little bit to these. So absolutely try it out. It is a crazy little build for y'all. Still one of the best in the game for one, just support on the Titan, as well as damage like I showed. That 3.5 million just in one little phase on that initial boss of the Warlord's Ruin. Definitely super juicy. So again, I appreciate all of y'all for sticking around, support me on the channel. One Eye Jedi on all of my socials down in the description. You got all of that, as well as the Discord. So again, appreciate all the support. Don't be afraid to like and subscribe on the channel so you don't miss out on any of the new guides or videos coming out. So thank y'all again, truly appreciate y'all. I'll catch you guys in the next one. Peace.